There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. This is my first outdoor video, al fresco video of the year. I'm sitting in the blaring sun. It's 18 degrees. I'm sitting in the golf course near my house, and I think I'm in the public area. So far nobody's kicked me out, but it still isn't ideal. I'm sitting on a bench. I thought there were picnic tables here. There are not. And I can't get in the shade and sit down. So this is the part one of a vlog, and it's my first vlog I've ever made in Saskatoon. I'm using my iPhone and I'm not sure where to look, so yeah, it'll be what it'll be. About a stack of library books I have out from Saskatoon Public Library that I'm going to kind of do a little idiosyncratic version of the try a chapter tag and page 112 and just kind of talk about the books and decide which ones I might keep and read immediately, which ones I definitely want to get back from the library later but I won't have time to get to them anytime soon, and which ones I will pre-bail on. So all I'm going to do in this first go around is show you the books and talk about them for a bit. I put up a video last week and it was called the Danuta Glede Literary Award, a Canadian award for debut short story collections, and one of the judges was a writer I'd never heard of, Sally Ito, who was born in Alberta and I'm not sure where she lives. She teaches at the Canadian Mennonite University, and I don't know where that is. Anyway, and I found out she wrote a memoir a few years ago that would be a great late addition to my Asian Readathon TBR. The Emperor's Orphans by Sally Ito, and it is about Japanese immigrants post-war Canada to the prairies in the early 20th century, and then of course one of a long list of Canadian atrocities was the internment of the Japanese Canadians, and so I'm assuming that is a big part of this story as well. So I'm going to do a preview of this and report back. I didn't know if I would bother including this in this video, but I'm going to. This is a novel by the gay writer Peter Cameron, Coral Glynn, and this was recommended to me. It was assigned to me, really, from Thomas of the book blog Hogglestock and former co-host of the Readers podcast. And when was it published? With holding this mic up, it's hard to turn pages. It was published in 2012, and it's one that Thomas particularly loved. I have read 2 books by Peter Cameron before. One of them I've read twice, so I really like that one. And what was that? The Weekend or Something Weekend. I'll put the cover gif up here. And then I read his novella Andorra, which I didn't like. Thomas did. Thomas and I are not, I don't mean to in any way imply that Thomas and I are besties. We're not, but he has given me some great book advice recommendations directly. And then, of course, my tastes overlap with his quite considerably. He's the one that introduced me to Barbara Pym and J. L. Carr and others. So I'm going to have a look at this one, and unless I don't like it, I will probably start reading it in later this month. Coral Glynn is the titular protagonist who arrives at an isolated mansion in the English countryside in the 1950s, and that's as much as I want to know about the plot from the synopsis, but let's find out what this is like, shall we? And here is a book that I found out about, I can't remember, somehow I was reminded of this book's existence. I thought I used to have a copy, but once I got this copy from the library, I realized I don't think I've ever had this book. It's called The Lost Library, Gay Fiction Rediscovered, and the editor is Tom Cardamone. And I flipped through it for the first time last night, and I think I'm going to really enjoy it. It is perhaps lesser-known gay writers paying homage to the gay books that they loved and that influenced them as gay men and as writers. So that sounds right up my street, and I'm going to preview this and probably not read it now, but it could very well be part of my Queer Readathon TBR. And this came out in 2010. And here is the last 2 are quite new releases. I think 2023 actually, both of them. This is the Chinese novel by Yan Lianke, translated as I think all of his stuff is. Certainly any I've read, and I have read 2 novels by him before, Carlos Rojas. This one was recommended by my book buddy Ronan Hession, the celebrated Irish novelist who came on my channel earlier this year to talk about books, and this was one of the ones he raved about. Joe and I originally planned to buddy read this. We still may, but another book that she had for a short time from the library came in first, so we're doing that. And so probably I'm going to put this off and buddy read it with her later, but I'm going to do a real test drive of it, reading some sections to see if it really is for me. I loved his novella. I don't remember the title. I'll put the cover gif up here, about a mother whose husband committed suicide but then stayed in the story as a ghost. And she had a family of, I think, 5 or 6 mentally challenged children, and she fought the universe to get them all married out and taken care of with stable spouses, with good marriages. And that's the plot of the novella. It was really heartwarming. The full-length novel I read, I think it was called The Explosion Chronicles, and it was a little bit too satirical for my taste, so I didn't ever get invested in the characters. If this one's going to seem similar to that, I'm not sure. So that's why I want to check it out. And lastly, this is a book that I had on my Trans Girl April readathon TBR, and it didn't come in from the library in time, so I've got it now. Màgòdiz by Gabe Calderón, and it is a trans non-binary fantasy novel with indigenous characters, and the writer Gabe Calderón has a very interesting identity, self-described as a two-spirit, trans, non-binary, and queer white settler with indigenous ancestry. And they originate from what is colonially referred to as Ottawa and currently thrive in Edmonton. So I'm not into fantasy at all, but the other things about this sound really interesting, so I want to preview it, and I don't think I'm going to read it right away, but who knows. And the other thing I wanted to say about the Yan Lianke is this is Asian Readathon month, so if I am completely gripped by the Yan Lianke such that I'm willing to jettison something else on my TBR to read it right now without Joe, that's also a possibility, but I think a pretty remote one. But that's the purpose of this video, so I'll check back when I've done some reading. Good morning! It's Tuesday, and I'm on my way to the branch library, so I'm going to take you there. I don't know how much filming I'm going to be doing inside. I don't think the library would take kindly to that, but I'll try to be discreet. This is a bench that I often think would be a good filming place, except I'm right beside a fairly busy street, so I'm going to be very curious to see how bad the traffic noises are with the microphone right up to my sensuous lips. That hopefully don't have toothpaste on them. I need to check at least 4 times, and I think I only checked 3 today. So I have previewed Màgòdiz by Gabe Calderón, and I'm not sure it's going to be a Shawn book, but I was interested. Let's put it, the best way I can put it is I was interested in what I read, the first chapter. It is a post-apocalyptic fantasy, I guess. I didn't get too much of a whiff of the fantastic, but I haven't read a fantasy novel since I was 12, so maybe it's there and I don't even know that that's what it is. But certainly the post-apocalyptic came through, and the indigeneity and the transgender stuff is fabulous. So it opens with a pair of lovers who are both indigenous, and one of them, who I think is the main character, but I don't know, Atagwewanu. She's the last surviving member of her nation. I won't try to pronounce it. And the enforcers have been trying to find her to capture her because the world is dominated by some ethereal spirit. So this, I guess, is the fantasy thing, called Màgòdiz, which sounds a lot like the Japanese word Màgòdiz, which means seriously. The indigenous stuff comes through really strongly, and that certainly held my interest. But this Màgòdiz ethereal, malevolent spiritual force, the enforcers, who are mortals, I guess, I don't know, do their bidding, do its bidding, their bidding. And Atagwewanu's lover is Belle, a woman, and both of those are she pronouns, and she's from the warrior nation. And they are captured, and I won't say any more than that, even though it's in the first chapter, by the enforcers. But there's a flashback to when the last village of the people, can I try to pronounce it? Atagwewanu's nation is Andorra Dijan. That's that I can do. And the last village of those peoples was razed, R-A-Z-E-D, and Ategwemenu's mother was killed. Anyway, it's about cultural survival, and the post-apocalyptic seems to be about climate change, so there's a strong environmental theme. A lot about forging love in a really cruel world. That might appeal to me depending on the character development, and I couldn't tell what that would be like from the first chapter. It is not a YA novel, even though the cover looks like this, is what many reviewers on Goodreads said. So that's hopeful for me. Yeah, I will try it, but I'm going to return it to the library now, and I may not try it again till, Indigithon, or whatever the new, I blanked on the new name, Skoden, in November, or I might try it for Transgrow April next year, or just without needing to attach it to any kind of booktube event. I might get it back again, but probably fairly low priority would be my final verdict. Gabe Calderón sounds wonderful. I gave you their identities as they described them themselves yesterday, but there's so much more. Just Google their name. You would just be shocked. Musician. I can't remember all the things they are doing or have done. Just a powerhouse of creativity and gender nonconformity and queerness. For that reason, probably more than anything, I think I'd really like to try this. So, let's go to the library!
But how can you pull it?
I'll figure it out. Or well, let's give it. I got books from you, and Jazz put this clear down to me. I was going to oh, bye-bye.
Well, here I am. I don't know how noisy it's going to be. The geese are a little honky. The geese are a little honky. I've never known them to come be so close to me without running away, so I don't know what that means. But here I am. The foliage is still very gray, except for the evergreens, because, it's very early. It's still beautiful, and just hope that you don't mind the noise. I have now previewed the first 10 pages of Yan Lianke's novel, Hard Like Water, which was published in English in 2021. And as I said before, it's translated by Carlos Rojas. And I liked the first 10 pages about as well as I liked the last full-length novel of his that I read. In other words, it's batshit crazy. I think most Chinese literature, to me as a Western reader, is batshit crazy. And I'm always just, my jaw just drops at the things that happen in Chinese fiction. In the 20th century, I haven't read anything beyond 20th century. But, and I enjoy that. But I didn't get attached to any of the characters in the previous one, which is called The Explosion Chronicles, and I have a feeling it would be the same here. So it's entertaining, and I'm interested in Chinese history and politics to understand how that a nation, politically, governmentally speaking, can be so malevolent. But you just have to grasp two things about communism, and it all kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, so this is set in a small village in Henan province, and it opens with the protagonist. So this is not a spoiler because it's the first paragraph of the book, that he is about to be executed for political crimes during, the context is not immediately clear, but by the end of the 10 pages it's obvious it's during the bloody Cultural Revolution. And then it goes back a little bit to when he was taking part in, what was it called? The National Construction Battle, which was early in the communist regime. In the early 1950s, they undertook to get a railroad from Beijing to, I think, southwestern China, and that was completed within 7 years, and he was on that construction crew. He went as part of the army. And I'm imagining this is not a historical fact, but actually that this is part of the weirdness of the novel, that he had to blast, not single-handedly, but he was part of the team blasting through a mountain, and he didn't come out for 20 months. Couldn't go home, didn't come out of the tunnel for 20 months. I'm not sure that would actually happen, but who knows. Anyway, and then his wife comes to visit him, and it was a long trip, and he didn't know why she was coming, and she wanted to get pregnant and have a daughter. And it was a weird sexual encounter where she scolded him for being sensual in the midst of this baby-making activity. And then reading the synopsis, which I never do, but I've now read the synopsis, and I did read the first couple paragraphs of the New York Times review. He eventually starts an adulterous affair, and by which time he is in the grips of the ridiculous communist Cultural Revolution mania, ideological mania, and he somehow gets it in his head that this extramarital affair, because both he and his lover are married to other people, is furthering the ideals of the revolution. So it's kind of that kind of a story. It sounds silly, but also serious, and, I think I want to read it. I think what I'm going to ask Joe to do... I could chase them away. I don't know if I could chase them away. There they go. Goodbye! Or at least they're further away. They're still as noisy as they were. Anyway, I think what I might suggest to Joe is that she preview the first 10 pages and see how she feels. If she's in, I'm in, but not this month. I'm not going to jettison something else from my Asian Readathon TBR to fit this in. No, I'll return this to the library, and I would be interested in picking it up at some point. One other thing that I noticed in the author, I think it was on the author profile on the back flap, or it may have been Yan Lianke's Wikipedia page, but he has written a memoir, and I think I'd like to try that to see if does he write memoirs satirically as well. So that is my report on that book and more tomorrow. Hello, well, it's Wednesday night, and it's about 6 o'clock, it might even be 6:30, and it is like 26 degrees out here. I can't believe it. So I'm at one of the playgrounds, not playground, that was a Freudian slip because you saw the playground right in front of me, but this mic only kind of captures my voice, and I just need to hold it not quite so. For the book review I did yesterday, I held it right up here, and boy, it was it was not right. So this is just about right, I think. Okay, 2 more books to tell you about that I have previewed. Let's start with this memoir, The Emperor's Orphans by Sally Ito. I really like the sound of this. I read the very short preface and then the first 10 pages. I thought that the Japanese-Canadian family would have immigrated to Canada a lot earlier than they did, though I don't know the whole story. There might have been other branches of the family that were here before that endured the internment of the Japanese Canadians during World War II. But Sally Ito's mother came to Canada in 1962 from Osaka, so quite recent. There's a real story about the family that is being already hinted at, and I have gotten engaged with that, wanting to know more about that, and the writing is quite lovely. So I'm definitely going to read it. I haven't quite decided. I suppose the purpose of this video was for me to decide, am I going to squeeze it in for the Asian readathon this month or read it later? I think I'm going to try to squeeze it in. It's about 200 pages, and it's really good, so why wouldn't I try? At the end of the preface, she writes this: "But often in art, the form of something arises organically out of its creation. The writer is a lump of clay waiting to find form at the beginning of their life in language. Writing one's story is a becoming of oneself through language, and as such it is, as Carl Jung aptly put it in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, a telling of one's personal myth." Just the way she wrote that, I thought, because I think that I don't have much time for Freud and Jung, but the way she wrote that sentence, maybe I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I do think the Freudians and the Jungians are pretty ridiculous. But anyway, and I want to see how Sally Ito explores that. The other one that I previewed is The Lost Library, Gay Fiction Rediscovered, edited by Tom Cardamone. If I'm pronouncing that right, it could be Cardamone. I'm assuming it's Cardamone. He is a writer. His website still exists. He writes speculative fiction, speculative queer fiction. This came out in 2010. And this looks wonderful. I am definitely going to read this for Pride Month next month. As I said the other day, it's a compilation of essays about gay male writers, writing about the gay male writers or the gay male novels or fiction that helped shape them as writers and as gay men. The first essay, I won't name the essayist, but it was about Rabi Alameddin's collection of short stories, The Perv, and I wasn't put off by anything about that collection of short stories, but I didn't really like the tone of the essay, so I didn't read very much of it. But then the next one was by Christopher Bram, a very noted gay novelist in America, and he wrote an appreciation of Alan Barnett's absolutely incredible collection of short stories, and I have it here. I've read it twice in my life, and it's time for a third. The Body and Its Dangers and Other Stories by Alan Barnett. And in this essay, Christopher Bram talks about being Alan Barnett's friend and, friendly caretaker rather than a professional caretaker during his last illness. He died of AIDS in 1991, so the year after this came out. Christopher Bram has written a really beautiful essay that it's both literary critical and personal about his friendship, his friendship with Alan Barnett, and how much he loved the stories when the book came out, probably some of them, I know one of them was published in the New Yorker. I'm pretty sure that was while Alan Barnett was still alive. It was one of the first gay-themed, or I can't remember. Maybe not the first gay-themed short story to be in the New Yorker, but the first one about the AIDS crisis. All of these stories are, in one way or another, focused on the AIDS crisis, specifically from the perspective of gay men I think in New York City, but I can't remember that. But in a big city, it could have been Boston. And just powerful, beautifully literary, crafted short stories. They're evocative of Alice Munro. So this collection of essays, I think, is just going to be a real revelation to me. I can't wait to read it. Got one more book to preview and wrap this up tomorrow. Well, hello, here I am Thursday night, and this is going to be a quick and dirty finale to this vlog. I've had a lot of fun doing it, by the way. Be doing lots more of these. I'm going to do these with library books, because I like to take out a lot more library books than I have time to read at the particular time that I've signed them out, and this is a fun way to explore them. So this is going to be, I don't know if I'm going to say a regular feature, but you're going to see this kind of thing again, so I hope you like it. So the last book I had to check was Glynn, the novel from, let's see, 2012, I think, by Peter Cameron. The only problem with this mic is I only have one hand to flip through books. Yep, 2012. And I only had to read about 6 pages of this before I put it down, because I absolutely fell in love with it. I did read the first paragraph of the New York Times review, and then I didn't need to read another thing. It's only got a 3.33 rating on Goodreads, and I don't understand that based on the little bit of previewing I did. But it was enough to know that this sounds so much like a Shawn book. Set in 1950, a woman comes to an old house in Leicestershire. I don't know how to pronounce that. Roz, you're going to have to help me out someday. And the old lady's dying, and so she comes as a nurse. She's the third nurse in 3 months. So the town gossip is, what's wrong? Is the old lady's son, who's a wounded war veteran, is he harassing them, or is the old lady too difficult to deal with? What's the deal? But Glynn is the name of the woman it's her first day, and she has just put the old lady to bed, and she's already grumbling about what she's expected to do, because the old lady, her name isn't important for this little talk. She's dying of cancer, and she's in the last stages, but she still insists on being dressed and brought downstairs. And then she sleeps all day downstairs on the couch, and then the nurse has to take her up, get her ready for bed, and then really hoist her up into a 4-poster bed that's really high, because that's the bed the old lady says she was born in, but she wasn't born in it. The narrator has already informed me that she wasn't born in it, but it's a lot of extra work for the nurse. She comes back downstairs, and the major, the old lady's son, who's got part of his leg amputated from a war injury, is standing there with a cane in the middle of the living room or whatever. And he asks how his mother is, but he says, "How is mother?" And the nurse inwardly thinks, "Why didn't you just say my mother? Why do you say mother to me?" And then, "Why are you asking me how she is? I have nothing to compare today, my first day on the job, to anything," is what she thought. But then she gave a much more diplomatic answer, and that I stopped at that point, because I already love the protagonist. And the writing is already grabbing me. It's kind of got a, period piece, 1950, and it has that feel, and there's a vague Barbara Pym feeling of it. The acerbicity, is that a word? Acerbigness of this protagonist. So I think it's going to be funny, and really it's going to grab me. So I'm definitely going to be reading this, starting this in the second half of May. So I expect that one to be a big hit. Glynn by Peter Cameron. And I found this, I realized I did have my copy of this on the shelf. This is his novella, or novel, I don't know, novella, The Weekend, which I have read twice, but I still remember nothing about, so I think I'm going to read it for a third time. When was it published? 1994, so I probably read it the year it came out, and then I think I read it again in the 2000s or something. I really don't know, but I know I've read it twice. Peter Cameron is a gay writer, and there's a gay main character here. I don't know if there's going to be any in the Glynn novel, and it doesn't really matter, but we shall see. So, to recap, I don't remember the order I did them in, so I'm just going to do them in the order they're on this pile. I previewed The Emperor's Orphans by Sally Ito, her memoir of her Japanese-Canadian family, and I am going to read it, and I may try to fit it in this month. The Lost Library, Gay Fiction Rediscovered, edited by Tom Cardamone. I am definitely going to start reading this, is the accurate way to say it. I'm such a slow reader, for Pride Month next month. Oh, I don't even have them all. I've got to go get some from somewhere else. Yan Lianke's Hard Like Water, translated by Carlos Rojas. Wasn't This one didn't grab me deeply, but it's probably one I would be interested in trying. I'm going to let Jo make that call if she can preview the first 10 pages, and she can decide whether we're going to buddy read it sometime this year or not. I know I have others. One sec, I've forgotten them inside. The other one was Màgòdiz by Gabe Calderón. I've already taken that book back to the library, and I did think that it was a book that I would try again, but I wasn't feeling a need to try it urgently. The fantastical elements and so on may end up causing it to be a bail, but there was things about it that I was really quite taken with, the indigenous perspective especially, and the big-heartedness with which the reviews all said the story was narrated. So yeah, I will try that. Okay, that's my vlog. What do you think? Thanks for watching.